Chapter 10, Part 3, we are going to graph quadratics. So an equation with x squared as its highest power variable will create a U-shaped graph, and this is called a parabola, not a parabola or a parabola, but a parabola. That looks like a V, sorry. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to graph this. You can use your calculator, but we're going to graph it by hand. And something that you want to make sure that when you square a negative, the answer is always a positive. So if you don't put parentheses around that in your calculator, it will give you the wrong answer. So just be careful. So we are going to plug in some points into our equation y equals x squared, which is going to be a quadratic, which is a parabola. So we are going to take negative 2, and we're going to square it to get 4. Negative 1 squared is 1, 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, and 2 squared is 4. So we are going to plot these points on our graph. So negative 2, 4, point, negative 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 2, 4. And again, these are just a couple of points, and we're going to connect them, and it's going to have that parabolic shape. It's going to look like a U. And this is going forever, so you want to make sure that you put those endpoints, you make them arrows. So it's going to go to infinity on both sides. So let's find the x and the y-intercepts first. So we could either look at the graph and see where the x and y-intercept is, which is going to be the same point at 0, 0. Or we could also look at the table and see where we have zeros. So remember, the x-intercept is going to be some number for x and 0 for y. The y-intercept is going to be 0 for x and some number for y. All right, now the next thing we have to find is the vertex, which is the very lowest or highest point of your parabola. And for this one, it is going to actually be the same point as the x and y intercept. That 0, 0 point here is that lowest point of that parabola. So in number 20, we are going to graph y equals negative 3x squared. And we're going to plug this in the calculator. And again, remember, when you do that, make sure you do negative 3, parentheses, negative 2, close parentheses, square it. So we will get negative 12. When we plug in negative 1, we'll get a negative 3. 0 is 0. 1 is negative 3. And 2 is negative 12. So we can plot these points. And the 2 and the negative 12 and the negative 2 and negative 12 are not on the graph, but we can just continue and draw those arrows. So we want to find the x and y-intercept, and again, looking at the graph or looking at the table, they are the same point. Now this is not always going to happen, so just be careful. And the vertex, which is now the highest point, is also going to be 0, 0. The next problem we're going to look at is number 23, and we are going to factor out x squared minus x minus 12. So that means diamond and rectangle. So we're going to fill that out. We need two numbers that multiply to give us negative 12x squared, but add to give us negative x. That's going to be negative 4x and 3x. And we can find those factors. So we're going to have x minus 4 and x plus 3. So once we know these factors, we can find the x-intercept by setting them equal to 0. So if we take x minus 4 equals 0, that will give us a positive 4. So one of the x-intercepts is 4, 0, which I'm going to plot. The other, take x minus 3 equals 0, so add 3 to both sides. I'm sorry, subtract 3. I got that backwards, sorry. This is plus, so we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. So we'll have negative 3, 0. So we have our two x-intercept points. Our y-intercept we talked about in class that we're going to plug 0 in for x. So when we do that, we are left with negative 12. So we have 0, negative 12, which might not be on the graph. I don't think it is. So I'm just going to kind of put a point down there, and then we can connect them as best as we can, to make a parabola. Now, the vertex for this one is not as easy to find as some of the others. But what we can do is we can take the average of the x-intercepts. So we are going to take average of the x-intercepts. So we're going to do 4 plus -3 and divide it by 2. So that's a half. And then what we can do is plug a half back into the original equation. So we're going to take 1/2 squared minus a half minus 12. And again, we can plug that into the calculator and calculate that. And it should give us around -12.25, -12 1/4. So our vertex is going to be 1/2, comma, -12 1/4. So the vertex is that very lowest point of the graph.